What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to my refined review and builds guide for Halloween female Grima, Merlinus, Catherine, Duessel, and Solon. So let us begin with Halloween female Grima, who I think has got a really good weapon refine. So she did have Moonless Breath as a distant counter weapon, and now she has got -1 special cooldown in the refine. So Dragon's Roar becomes a 2 cooldown special that she could retaliate back with because of having Dragon Scale as her preferred slotty skill, and she can also debuff easily -15 of foes' attack, defense, and resistance in the combat. So the -10 debuff is guaranteed, and then you get the extra debuffs depending on 10% of your resistance at start of combat. So it's not really all that hard to have 50 resistance with Halloween female Grima, so that way you're able to consistently get -15 debuffs. And she does have a super boon in resistance as well, and now she has got the halving of deep wounds effect, so this goes really well with her healing, and this is extremely helpful against the deep wound status and also fatal smoke, because even against that she is going to be healing up 25% of her max HP, so that is still a good amount of HP, and it goes amazingly well with her game plan. And then on her offensive special triggers, she is going to be getting 10 true damage, and then she gets full damage reduction piercing, which is not that easy for a flying dragon. They don't really have access to no quarter, so the full damage reduction piercing is fantastic with her offensive specials, and she also heals up 50% of her max HP now, so it has gotten a bit of an upgrade. So she can be really tanky in the enemy phase with this, and then she has got a bit of supportive effect in her refine with a joint drive scowl effect, similar to VEYLE. So just like VEYLE, whenever an ally is going to be taking advantage of her drive scowl, it is going to be having the visible resistance of Grima compared to the visible resistance of the enemy that the ally is going to be facing. So stacking up the visible resistance of Grima is actually really important, and then for herself she also gets the scowl effect in the combat, and it does help when she's running her preferred slotty skill, and she also gives out the drive, attack, defense, and resistance +4 to her allies in 2 spaces. And finally she has got flat damage reduction based on 20% of her resistance, which makes her a really good enemy phase unit with all of the things that she has got in her weapon. So this refine is really good for her combat and also good supportively, but it's just that because this is joint drive scowl similar to VEYLE, it's not gonna be all that flexible because you need to be in 2 spaces of your allies all the time. It's not like a status effect that you could give to them and be away from them. So you have to be in 2 spaces of them, which is a bit restrictive. And Scowl is still a really helpful effect, but nowadays we have a lot of special jumping. The Scowl effect is not the top of the priority list of every tank. They're probably going to be opting for some kind of stone terrain to face AoE specials, or the flat damage reduction of Sethith. But still, overall, as a complete weapon, this is really good for an older unit like Halloween female Grima, and it synergizes really well with her stat line. So if you're going to be building her up on super budget, you can just run her with Iceberg, as she's going to be able to retaliate back with it. Dragon Scale, her preferred slotty skill, does have the IO shield effect built in, which is amazing with her distant counter weapon, and it also has the attack and resistance debuff on the enemy and the special cooldown charge +1 per foe's attack. So she's able to retaliate back with this, and her default Dragon's Ire does give her the guaranteed follow-up attack, and then you could just run any kind of drive slotty skill to support your allies. And the Squad Ace Sacred Seal that can increase your HP, defense, and resistance is pretty much gonna be her best Sacred Seal, because having more HP means that you heal up more HP with her weapon on your offensive special triggers, and having more visible resistance does mean that you're able to meet the resistance check for the scowl effect on the ally units. So that's why the resistance boon is going to be her best boon that you could try and pick. And if you're trying to give her some of the fodder from Divine Codes, then Soaring Guidance not only gives you the extra stats for your flying and infantry allies and the half null follow-up effect, but also gives you the 2-space warping. So this is the main advantage that she has got over VEYLE, as she's able to provide the warping along with giving the scowl support. And we don't really have too many options for the slot B of a flying dragon. So Counter Roar is one of the options, which gives you the pierceable damage reduction and also some true damage with the damage reflection. So it is something you could try and run. And Emblem Ike Ring is going to be her best ring so that she could get more unpierceable damage reduction. And if you did get her in the Hollow forms a couple of months back, and if you have the combo of High Dragon Wall and Crux skill, then you have pretty much won, because these are the skills that she wants now after her weapon refine. So this just doubles down with the warp blocking with High Dragon Wall against the ranged enemies, and you also just provide the debuff on the enemies with the Crux effect, and she herself is able to get the guaranteed follow-up attack out of this, which is really helpful when you're running High Dragon Wall. And High Dragon Wall also has the Phantom Resistance built in, which can really be helpful with her weapon. And her best special is going to be Dragon's Roar, which is so much better now with this weapon refine, and she really wants to get the unpierceable damage reduction out of it. And if you're going to be ascending an asset, then attack could be a boon that you could try and pick. But honestly, I kind of prefer having the defense boon, and one of the options that she has got now is with Reopening and Breath of Life 4. So Breath of Life might seem a bit redundant with all of the healing that she has got, but keep in mind that this is a supportive effect that you could give out to your other allies. So if you got this in Hollow forms, this is still a pretty good scale for her, and she also takes the advantage of it when she's not going to be, triggering her special and getting the healing, and this also helps you against the AoE specials. And because she doesn't have guaranteed follow-up attack in her weapon, she's able to utilize Reopening to its full effect and get the flat damage reduction based on 20% of her defense, and also get the true damage. So defensively, this is going to be a really good skill for her, and both of these skills are also going to be available from Brave Alphonse. And then finally, at absolute max investment, you could try and run Stronghold in the slot A, and the reason being is that you're going to be getting the cleansing, and you also increase your visible resistance. And because you're not going to be running a preferred skill, this opens up your attune slot, so you can run Soaring Echo and provide the warping while also running some other slotsy skill. So Barricade is going to be the best warp blocking skill right now, much better than High Dragon Wall. And again, its cleansing might overlap a bit with Stronghold, but Stronghold prevents the panic and also the debuffs at start of the phase, whereas Barricade is always going to be giving you the defense and resistance debuff neutralization in the combat, which can help you against the middle of the turn debuffs. And this can also help your allies as they get the debuff neutralization. So this is a really good slotsy scale for the support. And Dragon Scales is, in my opinion, her best slot B skill. It doesn't really give her the flat damage reduction, but it does give her the guaranteed follow-up attack and also the special jump. So the special jump makes it so that with Emblem Marthering, she's going to be having one cooldown Dragon's Roar, and then she's going to be able to immediately have it charged up because of the special jump out of this. And this can also give you up to -11 attack, defense, and resistance debuff. So it all helps her. The 50% damage reduction piercing is going to be a bit redundant with her full damage reduction piercing weapon refine now, but still, this is definitely a really expensive option at max investment. Duessel was one of the original bulky Lance Cavaliers who was min-maxed, but with the times, he just had a lot of trouble keeping up because nukes just got stronger and he didn't have any kind of damage reduction in his weapon. So this refine tries to fix that and pretty much gives him everything that he wants. So Obsidian Lance did give him +3 defense, and it also has the guaranteed follow-up attack built in, and now he has got the Canto 2 in this weapon. So he doesn't really need to run Emblem Sigurd Ring now, and he can just utilize some other Emblem Ring. He also gets -12 attack and defense debuff on the foe in the combat, and now he has got the flat damage reduction based on 20% of his defense, which is something he really needed for being tanky in the modern times. And then he gets a supportive aspect in his refine. So for the foes that are in 3 rows and 3 columns centered on him, he's going to be having the lull attack defense -5 on them in the combat, and this is the lull effect, so it neutralizes any of their visible buffs to their attack and defense and also debuffs them with -5. And this also has null special charges effect, which just prevents them from charging up their specials using Flash Barrow and any kind of special charging effect. So it is basically going to be functioning like a defensive tempo effect for your allies. And this is kind of rare. We don't really see this as much as a singular effect in these kinds of refines. And then he also has follow-up denial. So this reminds me of Ashnard's weapon refine, but this is a lot better because Ashnard has got the guard effect, and I would take the defensive tempo effect any day of the week compared to the guard effect. But still, this is that Ashnard is in a much better movement type that has got access to a lot more supportive skills like the hold skills, the crux skills, soaring echo, and all of that. Whereas Duessel doesn't really have a lot of those supportive options to truly double down on that aspect. But nonetheless, this is a really good supportive weapon refine for the tanks to take advantage of, and he can be quite far away from his allies and still inflict all of these effects on the enemies as long as they are in the 3 rows and 3 column range. So it does add the flexibility to his support, and his combat also improves as he also gets the true damage based on 20% of his defense. And then finally he has got 7 HP healing after the combat, which helps him with the self-sustain. So Duessel got justice done to him as one of the veteran bulky mixed phase cavaliers that were so annoying to face back in those days, and he would just checkmate you. And now he has got access to the flat damage reduction, and he also can give the support to your allies. So even on a budget, he can be a really good supportive unit, and the lull effect and the follow-up denial and the defensive tempo is something that a lot of the tanks can easily make use of. And if you're going to be using him on a budget, then now you need to change his lull attack defense to guard. Guard is actually a really good effect for Duessel because he has that defensive tempo effect. So if the enemy doesn't have null guard, then they're just not triggering their special. So it can be helpful, and it's a budget skill you could run along with attack tactic that can give you more support to your allies. And you could just run Emblem Marthring. At the moment, that is going to be his best ring as he already gets the canto out of his weapon, and attack defense clash is the perfect secret seal for giving him more defense for the flat damage reduction and true damage while giving him the offenses. If you're going to be giving him the fodder from divine codes, then a ruse skill is really good. And again, like I said, the guard effect is really helpful with the support that he provides with the defensive tempo. So this is going to be adding to the supportive aspect to him, and crossbar attack is also in the divine codes. And like I was talking about, he can be far away from his allies and still support them. So crossbar attack just does that. You can also get even more debuffs with attack feint. And unlike a lot of these supportive units, because he has got Canto in his weapon, he could just rally and then get out of the way and get to the backline, which is not something that a lot of the other ruse support units are able to do. And for the slaughter, you could try and run attack defense clash force so that he could get the debuff neutralization to his attack and defense. This is going to be one of the skills that is going to be better for his slaughter if you cannot have the other expensive slaughter skills. And you could also feed him Brave Alphonse and all of his fodder. Now, unfortunately, because he does have the guaranteed follow-up attack in his weapon, he's not able to take full advantage of reopening, but still you at least get the flat damage reduction based on 10% of his defense, and also get some true damage and the guard effect. So I prefer having at least some flat damage reduction compared to the pierceable damage reduction that you might get out of something like Gambit, for example. So reopening is still not that bad for him, as Cavaliers do not have a lot of defensive options. Fortifications is perfect with him because he's really bulky and he has no trouble setting up the stone terrain, and this also gives him the distant counter effect, and he has got really high defense for making use of Breath of Life and also giving that support to his allies. No Quarter is going to be giving you the full damage reduction piercing, so it is going to be his perfect special. And like I said, Emblem Marthring is going to be making it a 2 cooldown special, which he likes having. And you could also run him with Attack Defense Excel as a really good skill for the flat damage reduction in both phases. And a snack skill is also helpful for the support, and it inflicts the sabotage effect on the enemy. So this way you can take advantage of the attack and defense debuffs. And Breath of Life is pretty much the main supportive skill that you could try and run on him. And you could also try and have momentum on him if you get an extra Emblem Sigurd at the end of this month. So momentum is helpful in both phases with its true damage. It's just that you get the special jump in the player phase. So in the player phase, you're able to immediately trigger your No Quarter, which is going to be a 2 cooldown special with Emblem Marthring, and then you could use Shadow Shift to support your allies. And Guard Attune skill is something you can try and run. Again, not really needed, but I'm just showing it as Guard is one of the better effects for him. And Momentum can just increase his damage output with the true damage that he has got now with his Refine. And then finally, if you want to have the distant counter always, then you could run it as an Echo skill, and that way you wouldn't have to initiate with something like Fortifications to get the distant counter effect, and you could just run Stronghold instead for its cleansing and the panic prevention. So it helps him function as a really good tank if that is the route you want to take. And again, he doesn't have a lot of options, so Reopening is a pretty nice mixed phased option for this kind of tank build. Catherine gets a Refine to her Thunderbrand. Unfortunately, she doesn't get the Brave effect, but she becomes a unique supportive unit with the Treachery status that she can give out. So Thunderbrand does have +3 speed, and it also has the inbuilt Desperation, so mainly she's going to be functioning as a player phase unit. And now with the Weapon Refine, she's able to give herself and the allies in 2 spaces the +6 attack and speed buff and the Treachery status. So Treachery basically gives you true damage based on the visible buffs that you have got, so it can be really helpful for hitting really hard, but unfortunately it does get countered by the Ploy status, which is quite common, and you also have to watch out for the lull and the dull effects, which are getting common nowadays. And it can be good with the playstyle of someone like Ecthenir, for example, that we did get in the Winter Banner, and she is one of the more accessible units that can give out the Treachery status to your allies. And keep in mind that Treachery does add the true damage to your AoE specials as well. So for a lot of the AoE nukes like Emblem Sigurd, this can be a way of boosting up their damage output against all of the anti-AoE measures. And she also gets +10 to all of her stats in the combat. She does have the full null follow-up now, and she also gets attack and speed null debuffs, so she doesn't have to worry about any of those debuffs to her offensive stats, and she can just commit to being offensive. She also gets true damage based on 20% of her speed. Unfortunately, this is not going to be added to the AoE specials, but still having a bit better damage output is helpful. And finally, instead of having a Brave effect, she's going to be getting potent follow-up attack, and most of the time this is going to be 40% of her strength, so she is going to be pretty much a Emblem Marth at home. I really wish that she got the full potent follow-up attack like Uller, and overall I kind of see her being more useful because of her Treachery support than her combat, because while she gets the extra effects, she's still missing some key effects that is needed for this kind of offensive infantry sword unit, like maybe Null Guard and -1 special cooldown, which is really big because it helps you trigger your specials a lot easily. And maybe having some damage reduction piercing would have also helped. So if you're trying to build up Catherine on a budget now, then you could simply just run her base kit and run her with Emblem Sigurd Ring. So this is going to be her best emblem, because if you want to function as a player phase infantry unit, then you need to have the Canto and you need to have the +1 movement. So the flat Canto 3 is really good for retreating and then maybe getting danced by, someone, or just for positioning, and the +1 movement goes without saying. So you could just run Savage Blow as the cheap slotsy skill and just run Blade Session as the Sacred Seal. And if you're going to be giving her a bit more expensive fodder, then you could definitely run her with Gust. Gust might seem a bit weird on mainly an offensive unit, but we're using it more so for its damage when it triggers. So it does scale off based off her speed, and Gust gives you 50% of her speed as the damage, whereas No Quarter is mostly going to be giving you 30% of your attack. So I find that Gust is going to be out damaging No Quarter by like 10 points in a lot of scenarios, especially when you have speed defense tempo 4 for the damage reduction piercing. So Gust can be a good special for the damage output, and Flash Barrow is the perfect player phase skill so that she can get these special charges and then trigger Gust on her second attack with Time Pulse 4 helping her, and even if she gets scowled, she is going to be triggering Gust on her potent follow-up attack. So the combination of special charges, Null Guard, and damage reduction piercing is all helpful to her. And you could also try and run Flash Barrow with Assassin Strike. So you can try and stack up the true damage basically with Assassin Strike. We're mainly going to be using it for that instead of the pre-combat damage, which isn't really all that good. And if you're not going to be running Speed Defense Tempo 4 in the slot B, then you could run No Quarter as the special so that you can get the full damage reduction piercing. And you can run Emblem Marthering if you want to. If you want to run Endless Tempest as a slot C skill, this does give you the dull all effect, so offensively it can help you. And you could instead run the Tempo Sacred Seal and run Assassin Strike in the slot B, so you can still have the Null Guard effect and try and trigger No Quarter on your double attack. As I said before, Treachery's true damage does get added to the AoE specials, so she can easily AoE nuke even though with her weapon, the true damage isn't added to her AoE special, but the Treachery status helps you with that. So she could run Slice of Sparrow for the +5 true damage for the AoE specials, and also run Momentum for giving her even more true damage. And Momentum also gives you the special jump, which lets you trigger AoE specials consistently with Infantry Pulse 4 and Time Pulse Echo. You could also try and pulse her down if you don't want to run Time Pulse Echo, but I'm just showing it so that she could be self-sufficient. You could also run Verge of Death for its cleansing, but I do like Slice of Sparrow overall as a skill for her because of the true damage, and because she's going to be having the potent hits. The true damage is really helpful on every single hit. And then she could also run Creation Pulse as a way of getting the special jumping, and with Time Pulse Echo she could instantly trigger No Quarter with the special jumps. She is going to be needing a bit of support with her allies so that she could have the negative status effect on the enemy, and that could enable the usage of Creation Pulse. And she could just try and stack up the true damage with Slice of Sparrow, Assassin Strike, and her weapon. So all of this can help her offensively. And then finally, you could also try and run her with Defense Res Pledge, which is a really good skill for her because you get the full buffs to her without any kind of support, and that gives you the full Treachery true damage, and you also get the special charges effect out of the Pledge skill. So with the Tempo slot B skill, you're able to easily trigger Gust on your second attack. And Time Pulse Echo is basically going to be her best attuned skill because she lacks the -1 special cooldown in her weapon, and mostly she's going to be preferring to run Emblem Sigurd Ring, and Gust is overall going to be a bit better with the Tempo 4 skill than No Quarter. Merlinus has the lowest attack stats in the game, and you probably have a better chance of finding alien life forms than utilizing his attack for offensive purpose, but still they ended up giving him a really unique weapon refine. So Convoy Dagger gives him +5 HP. Unfortunately, he doesn't have access to Sudden Panic, and he also has the most unique effect out of his refine, which is Permanent Wings of Mercy 3. And the reason why I say permanent is because it works at any HP. So he's able to move to a space adjacent to any kind of ally, and this gives him a lot of flexibility so that he can reposition his allies and make use of a lot of the modern dagger skills to just add support. And in a vacuum, this is an insane effect, but it is balanced by the fact that it is on Merlinus of all units. So offensively, he's not going to be a threat, and mainly he's going to be using this for the support, for moving his allies forward. He also gets -12 attack and speed debuff on the foe in the combat, and he has got follow-up denial. He also has 40% damage reduction piercing, which can maybe help him survive. And then he has got another supportive effect where on his rally or movement assist skill use, he's going to be granting the target ally and the allies in 2 spaces the +6 attack and speed buff, the bonus doubler status, and the null debuff status. So keep in mind that he doesn't get this for himself and only gives this out to his allies, and he needs to be the one to use the rally or movement assist. And in combination with his permanent Wings of Mercy 3, this is really good for supporting your allies and just warping to them. And he would be a really unique free-to-play unit with the bonus doubler status, but we just got Winter Echteneer, who can also give out the bonus doubler support and has got insane combat. Still, Merlinus does have that warping, And like I said, this kind of refine would have been insane in a vacuum, but on Merlinus, this does make him more useful as a support unit and quite a unique unit. And I could definitely see myself using him in Aether Raid's offense because of his warping, so that I could maybe just push my units into the enemy range and, Gale Force. So on a super budget, if you're gonna be using Merlinus, you could just give him HP plus 5 so that you could run the Panic Ploy Sacred Seal, and you could run a Link skill instead, which can fully buff up an ally with the bonus doubler and his visible buffs. And you could just run Miracle. I mean, he has no business being in the combat, and even if he's in the combat, he's not going to be doing any kind of damage with an offensive special. So this is something you could do. And you could also try and run Even Pulse Tie. So this is another way of utilizing his high HP if you're not going to be running Panic Ploy. And you could also use Double Tactics, which is perfectly fine on a budget with his bonus doubler support. But the main reason why his warping is so good is because of the new skill that Layla brings in Lookout Force. So from Rearm Layla, you could try and get this, and this skill gives you the distance swap effect, which is really good for pushing your units forward, and you also get the Canto too. So Merlinus could retreat using this, and you could also try and run a Ruse skill, which is perfect with his rally assist skill condition. So you could run Rally Defense Rest Plus so that you could just fully buff up an ally and provide more support. And for premium options, you could try and run any kind of boost skill that could increase his HP and also give him the survival. So it can be helpful. And then you could also run him with Disarm Trap 3. So his HP is so ridiculously high that you don't really need the version 4 of Disarm Trap or Potent Disarm, or even the full disarm that we've got. He's not going to be in the combat. He's mainly there to support, and he's going to be having enough HP to out HP the heavy traps and the hex traps. He just needs the disarm trap for the bolt traps. So you could try and run this and draw back an ally, so you can pretty much move them forward, and then you go ahead and use Lookout Force and its distance swap and push them even further. So this way you can offensively use his warping and initiate combat with your Gale Force units. This can be really helpful for any kind of beacon type of unit, like maybe Bride Lapis, for example, for just initiating combat against the enemy team. And the way that Merlinus is able to move the units forward while disarming the traps is quite unique. And if you don't want to run Disarm Trap, then Pass is also an option, unironically, in Aether Raids, because you're going to be facing Lorathor with Barricade in his base kit. So this way you could get past the warp blocking, and Stronghold could be run so that he could soak the Dark Shrine debuffs for your tanks. So it can be helpful, and Lookout Force is pretty much going to be the best Lotsie skill on Merlinus if you are going to be investing heavily into him. And then finally, you could also run Detect and Shadow Shift. So Detect gives you the lull speed defense on all of your allies against any kind of enemy on the team that has the exposure status on them. So it's a really good passive support, and one of the ways that Merlinus could double down on that. And Shadow Shift can also help you, get that reposition in his Canto. And that's why you would need to run Fortress Echo as his attune skill, so that he could get the consistent Canto instead of running the Emblem Sigurd Ring. In the sea of gimmicky red Grand Hero Battle mages, we have got Solon, and he gets a decent weapon refine in my opinion, even though he might seem gimmicky at first. So he does have his gimmick effect on turns 3 and 4 on the closest foes in 5 spaces. So he debuffs them for all of their stats for -7, and he also inflicts the gravity, the guard, and the flash status on them. So this might seem a bit bad because it only gives you that on turns 3 and 4, and ideally you're not going to be having it on every single turn, but this does have place now because of the calling circles mechanic that we've got in Aether Raids. So there he could, just debuff the enemy on turn 3, and then you could have the reinforcement show up. But still, this is the main gimmicky part of his weapon, and the rest of his weapon is going to be relatively consistent. So he can debuff the enemy's attack and resistance depending on 12 plus the number of penalty status active on them, and you can easily have up to like 4 status effects active on them with his kit and his resistance stacking. So he's able to get a good amount of debuffs. He also gets true damage based on 20% of his resistance, and then he has got a dual phase resistance check, and then he has got 2-space splash, which debuffs the enemy for -7 attack and resistance debuff, and also the sabotage status. So it is pretty good for a sabotage effect, and it also helps you, support your allies consistently and not in a gimmicky way. So I'm glad that they gave him some kind of debuff that is consistent. So that is helpful. And then he also has Del attack resistance built in, and he also has the guaranteed follow-up attack as he is extremely slow. So I do like this weapon refine much better than VEYLE's weapon refine, which I guess is not saying much, but still, I don't think that this is the worst thing ever. So if you're a big Solon fan, then I suppose you could just try and stack up his resistance. That is going to be the best course of action because he depends on the resistance check for the debuffs with his weapon, and then you could just double down on that support, run speed resistance discord, which can give you even more true damage and also just make you hit harder while you debuff the enemy speed. And then with defense res ploy, you could debuff the enemy for their defense. So this way you get the full debuff support with this kit, and you also inflict the ploy status, the exposure status, and the discord status on the enemy, which is quite a lot. The splash range of his weapons debuffs is similar to the splash range of the discord skill, and the good thing is that all of his debuffing effects are active in both phases. So it is going to be pretty consistent debuffs on the enemies, and you could also run Iceberg with Emblem Marthring for the damage. Pulse Up Ploy is a new skill that you could try and run, and if you're going to be waiting until turn 3 for his full effect, then you could try and charge up your special, and he's easily going to be having enough HP to make use out of resonance. And an absolute max investment, you could try and make him a bit more bulky with Lagu's Friend. His weapon is going to be active in the enemy phase with its primary effect, so you could try and tank and then still debuff the enemies with the Ploy skill. That is going to be one of the better slotsy skills for him. And Flare does work out with his weapon, even with Lagu's Friend, because he lacks the -1 special cooldown. So Flare is perfectly fine with Lagu's Friend as a 3 cooldown special. And then you could run Emblem Ring for more unpierceable damage reduction. And Stronghold or C bonus doubler could be an option for this slot A. Stronghold does give you more visible resistance for all of his debuffs and the ploy skill, so I kind of prefer it over the C bonus doubler. I want to thank all of my team members for their constant support, and you can click the link on the screen right now to check out my breakdown of the winter banner, and make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because YouTube sub boxes are about as functional as Merlinus's attack stat. So with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.